welcome. So I am Nicola Murphy. I'm the head of Microlearning Instructional Design at Gnowbe, part of our wider commercial team as well. I love to wear a million hats. It's good fun. My background is education. So everything that we're going to talk about today, or not just me to talk about, hopefully, is I love this space. It is really, really fun. Can everybody see my screen? Give me a thumbs up, yell at me, something like that. Wonderful. So I'm going to jump straight into the program. In terms of navigation, we are going to be jumping into session 2. You will see that these two are actually locked out. And if we're talking about behavior transformation and we're talking about behavior change, learner transformation, you can see that this is actually a really great way to orientate learners in a particular way that you want them to, just by actually locking them out. So I was trying to encourage everybody on the call to do a pre-session first. Why? Because I want to see who we've got in the room before you jump on the call. My job is not to be a talking head. It's not best practice for me to talk a lot, for you to maybe listen passively, maybe write a couple of notes down, but me actually not know in the exchange if behavior has changed, if transformation has taken place, aka, do you actually understand, have you retained, have you understood the concepts that I've gone after? And we often see with online content, that's quite a familiar story. We put our content out there, but we're actually not quite sure how it's received. So this is a fantastic starting point. I'm so glad to have you with us this morning. So let me just jump in, and I'm going to actually unlock session 2. So you will be able to have access to that now. If everybody, in terms of orientating themselves in Gnowbe, can jump into session 2, again, you can follow along just on the screen, or I would encourage you to jump on your phones and actually follow along as a participant. Why is that really fun? Because it means you get to interact with polls, with questions. There's going to be a little bit of application available as an option for you as we go through. Why? So that we actually get to wrestle past this thing. Rather than just head knowledge, it goes into practical application. Remember that clue, because it'll come in handy in a moment. We are going to jump into the very, very first action, which is where did Gnowbe actually come from? I think that might be an interesting kind of starting point, given the conversation that we're actually, or the topic that we're diving into today. So Gnowbe, believe it or not, actually started from a platform called Awaken Group. Our CEO is a lady called So Young. She really, really, really cared about a human-centric transformational design. That was in 2010 that this company was set up, and Gnowbe actually came out of that. And they were really, really building Gnowbe with this intention in mind. How do we actually achieve learner transformation? It wasn't enough for her just to just be a talking head in front of people and not actually see, have you learned it? Have you completed it? Have you retained it to the point that you can actually apply it and have an impact positive on the world around you? It's a really interesting experience when you try and take an in-person teaching, training, coaching, and try and do that on an online platform and still achieve that kind of human quality that actually produces change in the life of the learner. And so that really is the heart of Gnowbe. So if I just kind of move along here. Here's my first poll for you. I'm not going to put the answer in myself because otherwise I'm going to give it all away, but I'm going to give you about 10 seconds. I would love for you to choose the answer that best describes what you think Gnowbe means. What in the world does Gnowbe actually stand for? So you've got 3 options here, right? You could click, it's derived from the words know and be, reflecting on its focus of knowledge acquisition and personal development. That's one option. You might think, is this one a play on words? So blending the words know and globe to suggest a global knowledge sharing platform. Or there's the last one, which says grow knowledge into being. So taking what you know at a head knowledge and being able to, as a learner, get them to the point where they're able to practically apply something. So we'll give it just another 5 seconds for you to click on the box that you think most reflects what the hang Gnowbe stands for. It's always a fun conversation. And just while you're waiting, the little gnome that you've seen probably floating around on Gnowbe, you're probably wondering, why in the world is that thing there? Gnomes are small, right? If you think microlearning is small, small chunks of information. They're small. They live in the garden of knowledge, sharing wisdom collaboratively in the context of community. And if you know Gnowbe, there's a huge potential to be able to leverage group walls and actually share learnings so that we learn this way horizontally, not just vertically from an instructor or the talking head at the front of a room. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answer. Are you ready for it? Here we go. The answer is grow knowledge into being. Let's see how many people got that one if we're able to jump into the platform. Okay, it sounds like most of us are familiar. Good job. It looks like a couple of people kind of changing their votes there. So we got 6, 1, and 1. Absolutely correct. Grow knowledge into being. And if you see any Gnobian walk around, that's what we call ourselves as employees on the back of our shirts. The answer is given away. So you're welcome. If you see us, you know what Gnobe means. That becomes fundamentally important as we're thinking about learner transformation, and a really helpful starting point when you're thinking about, I want to see behavior changes, to actually evaluate, what does it actually look like? Why is this important? I could be aware of all of the tools and features that are out there in terms of platforms. I could be aware of nudging. I could be aware of the use of polls. I could be aware of the use of push notifications and all of these devices, but if I don't understand the why behind it, the goal, the end goal actually is, I want to be able to assess and see that behavior change has actually taken place. I need to actually first identify what it actually looks like. If I'm going to go into a training or a teaching or professional development, my end goal in terms of learner transformation, if I don't know that I want my employees to, let's just say I'm thinking of a specific behavior that I would want to see. Say they're going through an onboarding, reach the end, maybe learner transformation actually looks like they are more confident in their skill set. And they're able to demonstrate that to me. This is an example of, I can see that behavior has changed. Another one might be, just thinking through here, learner transformation. It might be not just that they're able to demonstrate it, but they're able to reflect on it, analyze it, put it into their own words, and there's a certain level of confidence that's there that wasn't there at the start, right? So I want to put it over to you. End goal. What is an example of learner transformation? What does it look like? And I'd love for you guys to turn off your mics because collaboration is way more fun than listening to me talk and offer suggestions. If you don't feel comfortable talking out loud, you can also throw your ideas into the chat. So what do we think? So again, the question was, what does learner transformation look like? What does it look like when a behavior has changed? And I've given you a couple of prompts here.
Hi, Maggie. It's Mark here.
Hey, Mark.
How you going?
I'm good. Oh, it's so good to see you. You got an example for me?
Yeah, just for me, it's like, what new questions, insights, and observation does the learner have after the information's been transferred? What are they taking away with it, for
I
them?
love that. I often view that as a personal marker of success. Sometimes if they have more questions going out of the room than what they did when they walked in, it means that there's a rub and attention of, here's my old understanding, here's the new information that I'm encountering, and I'm starting to actually evaluate, analyze, and have those deeper level questions. And often actually in person, that looks like they're having conversations in the room way long after I leave the room. They're still having chats about the subject. It's definitely a marker of success for me personally. Any others, team?
Yeah, just funny when you do that, then sometimes they end up coming up with like things that you never said.
That's the sweet spot right there.
But they've adapted the thesis of the conversation to their life, So yeah, just that, But thanks,
So good.
Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else? I know for one of our larger clients, they were working on an onboarding program, and I whittled them down to the why this content. It can be really, really easy to have all of that content to, I've got to tick off some boxes. You're a new employee coming into an organization. Here, go through this content. I can say, whew, right, you've done your onboarding. And essentially, you have to look at those markers of, has behavior actually changed? Because what are you trying to achieve? If you're taking the time to create the content in the first place, the better that you can get them, drill them people down to the why the content's been created in the first place, the more likely you are to actually reach KPIs and benchmarks and goals that you've actually set for the company. And that looks really, really great to you people that you're showing, right? So an example for these guys was they wanted to, when it boiled down to it, they actually really wanted to see better connection between their employees. They had a really disconnected staff. They were a global company, so most people working remotely from homes, and most people didn't know who was actually in their department. They didn't know what roles they played. They didn't know who to talk to about the various issues and things. So when it boiled down to it, the behavior change that they actually wanted to see was greater confidence to go and talk to team leads and actually know what everybody did in the company. Because they knew their why, that end goal, it meant that they were able to kind of reverse engineer their content, strip out all of the excess stuff in that particular course or program, and then embed some of these behaviors in there related to their end goal. So this is a really fantastic place to start. So I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. What other examples that can you think of specifically when it comes to behavior change or learner transformation? So what Joanne is saying, when learning goes from what I have to do because, oh, this is really good, because my boss said so, to I want to learn as it benefits my career growth, have the power to upskill and remain future fit. And I love this because this is from the learner perspective. So me knowing that as the person who's creating content, I'm going to embed particular techniques, features, tools that produce motivation here, right? I want to learn as it benefits my career growth. So in this instance, I'm actually going to want to put an opportunity for them to be able to reflect, to be able to set goals for themselves, and then basically pre and post, give them the opportunity to reflect on how much they've advanced or not advanced and what's next. Love that. Elena said increased enthusiasm, engagement, and curiosity. Absolutely huge. In a world where we're inundated with information, this is so incredibly valuable because we've got to actually work harder as content creators to keep people engaged, to keep people enthusiastic when they could just jump into a different tab and be on social media, right? Curiosity is a really great one. I don't know if you've played around with the concept of a hook at the beginning of a session. An example in Gnowbe might be a poll, or it might be the word puzzle action that you've got there, but snapping people out of that kind of passive state of learners that we're just so used to being because we're used to talking heads like I'm doing right now. We're so used to that, we need to kind of snap them out of it, right? I love this too. And Meek, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. I sincerely apologize. It looks like a really beautiful name. When they get really bored, absolutely, and they go to that kind of awake and alert stage. That's my favorite thing to do when you get people coming into a room or going through content. It's fun to do in person. It's really intriguing to see if you can achieve the same thing online asynchronously when you're not actually there. Can it be done? Yes. And it's some of what we're going to look at today. So let me just shift on to the next slide. If you put some of your responses in here, you can actually share it to the group board and I would be able to see it pop up here. So there might, yeah, look at it. There's a few actually here. Sorry, Brian, I didn't ignore you. I promise it was right here. Do you want to talk about this just for 2 seconds before we move on? This looks really good. So
yeah, I didn't get to finish the story because I started listening to everybody else, but recently had a chalk talk. And it was to get us to there was a very sophisticated goal of machine learning at the end, but there was a lot of mathematics. But the great thing is the chalk was the mathematics, right? But it was a conversation of this professor, and I believe he's probably about 70 years old, so very wise and smooth, but it was that conversation that connected dots for us that really taught us what the why was. So the why wasn't the mathematics, it was the story, the history behind it, to really be able to go and understand a much more complex concept later on. So he did a beautiful job of really hooking us in and kind of nudging us along of understanding it versus just the mathematics.
So good. Okay, here's a question for you. How would you do that online when you're not actually facilitating?
I would probably attend a Gnowbe seminar led by you to figure out how to do that.
Cheeky. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, definitely that's the fun science of this. How do I actually create this experience online when I'm not actually there? And yes, there are a bunch of different ways to do that. I would say one of that you can see in the next action that we're about to go into. As actually some of it is anticipating the needs of your learners before they walk into a space. The more that let me just go to that for visual purposes, right? So we'll just jump into here. Also, it's the sweet spot of teaching and training when your learners actually are starting to think ahead of you, which is the instance that's just happened here, right? If I know my learners and I know who they are, I can anticipate their needs. I can anticipate the roadblocks that they're going to have, the questions that they're going to have, the challenges that they're going to have with the content, and in the use of rhetorical questions. And then my own personal process as a curator, giving examples and modeling, certain thoughts that they might have, ideas that they might have. I can actually achieve that same thing in short bite-sized pieces, right? Knowing who your learners are really does actually help to make sure that learner transformation has taken place. And so often we fire hose people with the content, and we assume that everybody is kind of a one size fits all. And we don't actually know that maybe our unique users actually respond well to, in some countries, a talking head and me just talking audibly is enough. For others, it might just be, hey, I'm used to a lifestyle of, I just like to consume passive content on the go. I would challenge them as to how much learning has taken place there, because people who just put podcasts in their ears, and they kind of apply that same approach to deep learning, and may or may not be effective. But knowing that about my audience is really important. If I know that my audience has a really short attention spans, or maybe they're just actually, I would challenge the attention span thing and just say that we're more adept at being able to filter out content that's important to us and not, because we've seen on social media, you see TikTok, you see Instagram, the 10-second kind of sound bites. I think there's something called threads that's just popped up on Instagram, and it down to like a sentence level, they're going to try and hook you so that you actually stay engaged to learn more. And in most instances, they're actually really effective, and there's something that we can learn in there, right? Identifying kind of how your learners want to change. So someone on the call mentioned, that goal setting actually would be really, really motivating for them, knowing that I can use something called a copy user answer in Gnowbe to get them to, assess, this is where I want to head and this is where I ended up. So valuable. And identifying why your learners actually want to change. They're there. So what is it for them? And it prevents us from covering content and what we actually say, just causing our learners to learn, which is huge. So let me move on here. I'm curious, before I rabbit trail on, hopefully not rabbit trail on, I want to give you some really, really great techniques and tools to actually achieve learner transformation. Here's what I'm curious about. What strategies or techniques have you found most effective in driving behavior change in your own content? So I'm going to give us a moment just to reflect on that for ourselves. And then we're going to do a little bit of sharing. Don't be distracted with the sound of my typing. I'm just best practices. If I'm going to get you guys to do something, I'm going to do it myself. Why? It models it, and it's a form of a motivator for you also to complete. So what techniques or strategies have you found most effective in driving behavior change in your own content? One of mine, just to kind of start the ball rolling, is push notifications. It's something that I knew Gnowbe had. And I'm not saying we have to think Gnowbe centrically, but there are a lot of tools that we would use or strategies we'd use in person that would lend themselves to the tools in Gnowbe when we're looking at content. But one of the ones I've definitely underutilized and started to use in the last 6 months is push notifications. I teach a bunch of university students. I'm training leaders and educators, workshop leaders. And I typically will use that push notification feature to actually get them to go back in and complete content. I didn't realize how effective it actually was. Why is this behavior change? Because I actually really want to know. I use it as post feedback a lot. So say I've done a live session like this in person, and there's a post session like this. I will send a push notification, be like, hey, Nicola, because I'll use I don't know if you've played with this, but it's a really, really great tool. The curly brackets like this. So if I go here and I just go save and view, you can see it pops up with the learner's name in here just because I put those two curly bracket features. Personalization is huge. If I see that pop up on my phone, Nicola, have you gone back and completed the post session? Oh my gosh, it does something to me. It releases endorphins and I'm motivated to go and complete because I do not want that notification on my phone. And there's accountability there, right? Particularly if it's come from my CEO. So that's an example of a really great tool that can actually just drive completion rates, which is a form of behavior change. I'm going to leave it up to you guys, and I'll just share this to the group board and see if anybody else has put up their answers here. Awesome. Stephanie, do you want to just chat through yours a little bit there? This looks really intriguing.
So it's a framework for really the planning and design portion of the work. I don't do a lot of external stuff. It's not a capability that I work with in my context. So I have to make sure that my content itself is really addressing very specifically the need I work in the tech side of a university, so there are business goals that need to be addressed and changes that need to happen at an academic pace, unfortunately. So the change is very, very slow. But by doing a lot of really hard questioning of my clients about what exactly do they want to see, how do they know that the training has been useful or has done anything, I can focus on that and try to make the minutes that my learners spend with my material as valuable as possible. And that usually will motivate them to come back because they know that this is not just a click through thing. This is, if I spend 5 minutes here, I'm going to get something. So I'm very focused on what do they take from it that they couldn't get on their own.
So good. Can you say that last line again? Because that was a great point.
Well, with any kind of, especially with in person, there has to be a reason to be there. So I always have been teaching for 25 years and I've recently switched over to instructional design side, but my main objective has always been, what are my students getting? What are my learners getting that they could not do themselves?
Really
that they
good.
would not find themselves. So
good. Great answer. Anyone else, what strategies are you guys leveraging already to try and drive behavior change? I'll open up the floor so you can feel free to turn off your mic.
Hey, it's KT. So I work in instructional design at a university, but in like a really student-facing role, and so I help instructors, help build classes. One thing that I talk a lot about instructors with is, giving a variety of different types of delivery of content. So like having a podcast, having a video, having a supplemental reading, letting students know you're not expected to watch all 3, all 4, but you do need to watch some, and then for the more week to week, having the sort of knowledge checks be a little more reflective, or allowing the learner to kind of dictate the terms rather than answering a list of questions.
I love that. It's so good. We call that like student agency. So all roads into the same goal, but they get to kind of choose what modality works in terms of how they consume content best. We talked about some of us might just want to push a button and be driving in the car and learning, and other of us might, but I love that you also have the reflective checks at the end. Super valuable. Otherwise you don't actually know how well it's been, received, applied, retained. So fantastic example. And changing up content is really important. How many of us actually, if we're really honest, could sit in a conference session all day long and hear back-to-back speakers just talk at us? We're probably not going to remember a whole bunch. And if I actually care about that behavior change, which is why we're on the call, right? If you're going to take the time to create the content, you want to make sure that it's actually stuck, landed, been retained, applied, brought transformation in a community or group or organization. Then you've actually got to think about changing up the different kinds of content that you use. That's kind of why you can see in Gnowbe, if I just kind of jump back out here and go into, I don't want to lose my changes. Let's just share that to the group quick. If I go into edit mode, you can actually see the types of content that we have. You can throw all your content in here in different ways. There's video, there's text, there's multiple choice. There's different ways of, bite-sized pieces of content that kind of just change up the way that it's, that it can be delivered for students. Something else that you kind of touched on there, which I thought was really interesting, or maybe think of, is when we're thinking about student agency, what would it look like to actually get them to collaboratively construct something with you in terms of the learning? So AKA, Stephanie was talking about, the pieces of information that are actually really, really valuable to them, the way that they want to learn. I've actually just implemented a course at the beginning of the next semester. And students, as they're learning how to teach effectively, they're actually going to co-construct the course with me. I'm obviously going to have those foundational pieces that are in it, but they're actually learning as they go and have autonomy in the process. So you're more likely to get buy-in, right? So super cool. If we just one more person, I know there was a couple of people fighting to be able to let us know what their strategies were. Yes.
Mark, yeah, no, I just, just in what, because I've used Gnowbe now a few years, and strategies that I've noticed and used for change is that, one, I've got a coaching accreditation with a lot of words, a lot of reading, a lot of podcasts, a lot of videos. And when I enable the learners to do most of this in their own time, I can then focus on what's important to them when we meet up in person. So through all the content that we actually go through when we meet is dictated by what they're most interested in, what they're most excited about. And it also allows a bit of box ticking as well in their own time. And then I've been teaching a class up in the Great White North up in Canada for the last 6 weeks, and they've had access to all the content for the program. And I can notice there in the back of the Gnowbe program how they've interacted and when they've interacted, and then I can adapt my teaching plans to focus on what they seem to be getting excited about.
Yeah, that's really good.
Something and then just lastly, just lastly, I've noticed that we don't all want to be talked to, but we sort of need it sometimes, because we don't always want to like reflect and be experiential. Sometimes we just want someone to talk to us.
It's true.
Yeah,
that is really true.
And I reckon this type of learning, when people can do it anywhere, any place, any time, then gives the instructor a bit more space and permission to do a wee bit of talking head, if that makes sense. So
really good. There's a couple of things you said in there. One was what we're calling essentially like a flipped classroom model. So being able to give them the information, kind of they got to know this stuff, but it means that when you get into perhaps if you're doing like a live session, you can go a lot deeper because they've kind of got that foundational knowledge already. And then being able to see information on the back end, like Mark's talking about, is super valuable. I'll talk about a couple of things in a minute, but that's really great. There's a lot more things that we could go after, but we will move on just for the sake of time here. So just a quick intro to behavior design, because it just kind of helps set the stage a little bit. It's the more that you understand human behavior and how learners, particularly Gen Z learners, have really changed the game in terms of onboarding for companies and professional development right now. The way that we consume content and the needs and preferences that we have are so vastly different than they were 10 years ago. We've got massive companies scrapping their content and having to get back down to some basics sometimes, embedding more practical stuff in there. The more that I actually understand about human behavior, I can actually design effective interventions to influence it. One example that I can think of in terms of promoting great behavior change just outside of Gnowbe is thinking about apps like Fitbit, right? It's designed to kind of get your exercise up and going. It sends you push notifications. It helps you to set goals. It gives you feedback. It pops up with something on your phone if you haven't. I mean, I've got an example of not this one, but a fitness app, and I'm working so hard to try and close that loop of steps that I have set for myself each day. Guys, I'm failing terribly this week. I sit in front of a computer too much to creating content and having meetings like this, but I'm working on it. But there's something about that, those little features embedded in there really, really strategically to get me back on track. The timing of when those are sent out, in Gnowbe, you can do that as well. We'll show you in a couple of things, but it's an example of another app that embeds behavior change. Can you think of any others real quick? One day, I think it's called Duolingo, where if you're learning a different language, like Spanish or something like that, it has a similar sort of mechanism. That's another one that kind of comes to mind. It's helpful to think about this because we can employ some of these techniques into Gnowbe as we're designing, so that we're not actually just giving them content straight. We're wanting to, just when we think about course concepts, we're wanting to create habit formation. So this is a tool that I have vastly underestimated, and it is daily messaging. So I'll show you an example of that in a minute, but being able to embed that into every single action, if you're doing like a drip feed sort of situation. So when Gnowbe first started, actually the very, very first program, I'll show you in a second, it was actually a day-by-day thing, I think, for a period of 20 days where they rolled it out to a bunch of different leaders. And it was really small pieces of content. They put daily messaging in there, and it kept people on track to being able to get stuff done. Motivation, there's in terms of motivating people, there's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic. So extrinsic would be an example of getting a coin. We think about the gamification. I've got a badge. I've got a different mark against my name. I've got 5 points, but Brian's got 2, so I'm motivated to keep ahead of him. In Gnowbe world, we got the example of like the puzzle features. So if I just really quickly show you this one here, you can see here, it has this little seconds. I can solve something in 28 seconds. But oh my gosh, if Brian solves it in 17, I am so peeved because I thought I was nailing it and I thought they got that answer really fast. You can share that to the group board and kind of skite means boast about how fast you completed it. But it's, that competitive element does actually help for some of our learners. Sorry, Brian, I'd love to tag you. I don't know why, you're just fun. Okay, let me jump back down here. It triggers, so sending out push notifications. If I see a Facebook notification with that little red symbol at the top of my screen, oh my word, there's something about the red, the color red. Then endorphins are released, and it prompts me to click on that thing to clear it out of my box, right? And also, it's attached to social, so that helps as well. But push notifications using their personalization are a really great way of motivating people to action. And feedback loops, getting people to actually, if we're thinking about pre and post. So an example of that would be the copy user answer. So I'm going to show an example of that now. Has anybody come across this one before in Gnowbe? If you haven't, I'm about to change your life, because as an educator myself, it's a game changer for me. Pre and post, it's a beautiful tool. So let me just show you an example. Can you see this on the screen over here on the side? Let me just move this here. It says copy user answer. So what this tool actually means is, say I get people to comment at the top, and my content is about leadership. And I say, tell me what you know about leadership, Nicola, using my curly brackets. And say I put that at the beginning of session 1, because I actually want to know, what do they know? And you can find this on any single action that's a Q&A type of question where they get to respond. It's just the 3 dots, hover over it, and you're going to find it right there, okay? I could get them to say, what does leadership actually look like? Give them a whole bunch of content, hopefully beautifully crafted, so I'm not just throwing it at them. And I get to the end of my program, and I could ask them that same question using that copy answer function. And so basically it will pop up with something that looks like, Nicola, in the first session, you said that leadership looks like, and then you would paste that code, and it would give you all of the answers that you wrote for that particular question, and then get you to respond on it the second time. What do you think now? Now, how powerful is that for you as a learner? That's motivating onto the goal of, I want to actually advance my own goals. And how powerful is that for our people who are creating content? An example that I can think of is that we have a team leads call every week in our company, right? So a group of us gather around. We've got our high-level plans. We are transparent. Here are my 2 or 3 things that I'm going to accomplish in a week. The following week, when we jump back on that call, we have hey, Nicola, you said you were going to do this and this and this. And then I want you to reflect on how you actually went. Now, knowing that my CEO sees that and other team leads are going to see that, I am so motivated to make sure I actually tick off those things and I've done them, and I actually explain how I've done them or what worked and what didn't, right? So very powerful tool that you can use there. I'll stop and just any comments at this point before I move on.
I was just going to say, someone who's also impacted by that in our team leads call. I think the nicest part about it is it takes the responsibility, in those moments, it takes the responsibility off of the content creator or the teacher or the facilitator to remember and bring that back to you. It's the program is doing that, and it's this feeling of, oh, it's not even somebody nagging me about it. This was something I promised to myself, right? Like, I wrote this to myself with no allegiances, for me. And then to have it come back and be like, oh, this is what I wanted to get done. And did I get it done for me? I think is more impactful, because I'm more of a self-motivated person. So I like seeing okay, this is what I promised to myself too. And I'm looking at it later. Did I do it? No. Yes. Yay.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, great example. So what strategies can you actually use to influence behavior change? Now, if you're on this particular action, which is action 7 on session 2, you can see that if you click on them, you're going to get some answers kind of below, or some kind of follow-up. So If I click on this one and I go through simplify using micro learning, for some reason the actions actually, let me just quickly check in here. It's in there. Simplify by using micro learning, really important. We've talked about this already. That's breaking down your content into bite-sized pieces based on your understanding of how your audience, your learners, actually learn best. Making your content attractive. We talked about this one a little bit through games, incentives, gamification. Incentives might be intrinsic, like, oh my gosh, my boss is going to read this. Extrinsic, if I'm super competitive and I want that kind of coin or gamification, or in our case, leaderboards. So you'll see in your messaging every single week, I think it's on a Friday, you actually you can kind of see who the top 5 learners are in terms of completion rates, kind of pop up on what we call a leaders board. The social influence aspect, I always jokingly say that the learning sometimes happens the best on the way out the door. It's not what they hear in the conference session, it's in the conversations that they have after they leave the room. So making space for that within our program content, giving them a chance to actually talk to each other on the group boards, but not only just write their own stuff, but actually like other people's comments, add to people's comments, give constructive feedback. Add other ideas, hugely valuable. It's not to be underestimated there. Using timing, this is definitely something that I know I'm working on, because it's just something I haven't really played with a whole bunch, is this, there's something called a daily messaging feature on Gnowbe. And if I can talk about it really quickly, in an example, here's an example of a program. If I jump into leading others for a second, and you can kind of see, if I go into edit mode, this was the very first program that Gnowbe trialed, by the way, on a whole bunch of people, while they were thinking about where the behavior change actually works in the context of this platform. Obviously, it was very successful. But you can see under daily messaging, yeah, has anyone seen this feature? It's so brilliant. So underneath every single session, you can kind of see, general is what you're probably used to seeing, but if you click on daily messaging here, you can see that there's an opportunity to put a push notification in here. So this might be, a beautiful quote. It might be, have you gone and encouraged somebody today? Have you gone and done this thing? Have you gotten this task done before you jump on the next call? There's also an email message, but the cool thing, it's not tied to everybody at the same time. So let's say Brian is going, you could set it up and kind of unlock it, lock different sessions, streak learn it, so people can do as much as they want, or jumble all around. Depending on the way that you consume content is the way that you're going to get those push notifications. So essentially, Megan might get different messaging than I do, depending on the way that we consume content, if that makes sense. So it follows along with you as you consume the content, which I just really love. So that's a really valuable feature right there. Incorporating practical application. This is something that I think we're all getting better at. Our Gen Z learners, particularly, they're so inundated with content. Actually, we all are. That actually, when they sit in our trainings, it's a common question that I ask people in my rooms. Why are you on my call? You could find out most of this information on ChatGPT or Google if you knew what to ask. And the common responses that I get are, under this goal, I really want the practical experience. I want your insight. I want the real-time feedback. And I want to be able to put it on its feet and actually give it a go. When we think about practical application in the context of something like an online program like Gnowbe, my question is, how in the world do we do it? I'm going to put that out to you guys. What do you think? Remembering that the content itself is the what. We're very familiar with consuming content like that. The practical application is the how and the why. The why is really important for our learners. So we've got the buy-in for them to actually, get into the stuff. And the how is the piece that we often miss. How would you do practical application on an online platform like Gnowbe? I'm so curious. I'll open up the floor to discussion for a second.
Videos.
Tell me more.
If you have your learners, you give them a scenario, or you say, given what you've learned, how would you handle this situation? Record yourself how you would speak to this, or give me your interpretation of it. Sometimes it's hard to kind of write it all out, or to picture how you would interact. And I think the studies show too that if somebody is recording themselves for sharing purposes, they end up doing it around 6 times before they submit it. So that means,
Yep.
you know, they're practicing it. You know, how many times do you record something before you hit publish, right? So not only is it giving them the opportunity to really think through it and like put it into application, but like they're also practicing it before they put it out there. And then you can have people comment to, you know, or respond to that on the wall, and it just kind of creates an environment where people are applying it.
Yeah, really good.
A more real situation.
Yeah, grow knowledge into being, right? That's the motto of the motto, I guess, the meaning of the word Gnowbe. I've actually got to put it on its feet, and I don't want them to just try it once. I want them to try it and actually have opportunity for them to fail safely while they're learning to get it right. Interesting notice, and Brian, I see your hand there. I was talking to a client a couple of weeks ago who was trying to get their learners to do like a video on I want to say, what was it, a Canva, and they couldn't actually get people to use the selfie or the video modality on a platform, on a like a desktop sort of a system. They got them on Gnowbe and they had absolutely no problem. Why? Because their behavior is we're so used to taking selfies and videos of ourselves on our phones. So they didn't actually have a problem with getting people to do it. It's a really, really great tool for like role playing. You know, we often do that in person in trainings and things. Why can't we do that online and get them to role play or use it as a reflective exercise? I know I find out so much more about my users when I get them to use that tool. And I'll just show everybody what that looks like, just so you, if you're wondering what the hang I'm talking about. If you jump down here, it's this one. So you can literally put this one in here, the take video or photo. It gives you the option to either take a photo of something, which again is a practical application. It might be draw something, sketch something, diagram something out, take a photo of it, upload it. That's a really, really powerful way of getting them to synthesize their information. Or a video might look like this role playing or the other pieces that we're talking about. So great tool there. Brian, I saw your hand.
Just repeating a lot of what everybody was saying to get the practical experience. We deal a lot with refugees, so we'll give some lessons and then we'll ask them to go into the workforce and actually apply that, and then come back and do the video to, you know, to respond to that. And I'm glad Megan said it was 6 times, because I think I'm ahead of the curve. I'm only about 5.75 times I redo mine. I just constantly redo it, but so we find that it's pretty good, and I do think it does make them practice, because they do have to report back with that video, and so they're going out and applying that knowledge.
That's wonderful. And then there's that social aspect too, of if I encourage them to share it to the group board and give each other feedback, as in I often will use this like in a student context. Maybe they're having to work on interviewing skills or conflict resolution skills. They role play it, but maybe in the previous action using the PowerPoint tool or the PDF where I've just embedded it into an action. That's a sneaky one that's kind of up the top hand corner, by the way. If you go into edit mode, you could have like a rubric, and then basically, hey, give each other feedback based on the criteria that's in this rubric. So you're giving them specific opportunities to give each other feedback where they go into that group wall and give each other feedback on those videos. So a really powerful one. One more that I can think of is a client of ours actually used Gnowbe in a really, really creative way for their onboarding program. This is the same one that I was talking about, who really cared about trying to make sure that their employees actually were connected to each other as a staff as they were being onboarded. They used Gnowbe as a tool the instruction would say something like, go and talk to your team lead, get some advice about blah, blah, blah. And so there'll be a series of steps in like a text sort of an action. What they actually had to do, though, as a part of it, I think it was like 5 team leads or something like that, go and get some advice, come back to the platform, share it. But the other thing they had to do was that also would get a letter from every single one of those team leads. And so they would come back to the platform once they'd had these conversations with these 5 different leaders, gotten some advice about onboarding and how the company worked and all those sorts of things. But once they'd gotten those 5 letters, they came back and this company used the word puzzle tool, and they posed a question, and all of those letters unscrambled to actually be the answer. So if they didn't have those letters, then they couldn't actually move on. So it was such a creative way of basically, you know, Gnowbe's a tool. It's supposed to be something that serves you, sends you out to do something, think on something, reflect something, apply something, evaluate, come back, share the learnings, and then grow deeper that way collaboratively. So I thought that was a super creative tool. I definitely wanted to make sure that I shared with you. Just a couple of quick studies, case studies, I guess. This is an example of like a daily program. It was created during COVID, and the idea of it was to get everybody to encourage everybody who was kind of going through the same stuff. We were all really, really isolated in that period of time. Gnowbe was used. I think they had like 365 sessions, one for every single day of the year. It was based on this kind of drip feed principle. So every single session was locked until you'd kind of gone through, and there was daily messaging as a part of it. Fun fact, you can actually jump into that program now and go through it now if you want, just kind of cycle around and see what people have written and how they experienced it. Another example of learner transformation, I guess I could call it, is this is the first program that I was talking about. I think I showed you a little bit of this before actually, but this was the very, very first program that Gnowbe put out, which was, I think they were like, let's do this for 30 days and just trial it on a bunch of leaders in a bunch of different countries and see if we actually get learner transformation. They ended up whittling it down to 20 days because they found, in terms of knowing their audience, that 20 days was actually more achievable than 30. They had a kickoff call to start things off. Why is that important? If you're going to do something for a long period of time, starting off with a kickoff call where everybody's gathered around a common goal, making sure everybody can sign in, making sure everybody's motivated to start, is a really great way. I would also bookend it with a, what did we learn? Let's celebrate, let's highlight certain people, or those kinds of things as well. The daily commitment, they all start at the same time. The tools that we used, all of these, you could see there were lock sessions, there was daily drip fed information, push notifications, gamification. This one, the copy your answer that I mentioned before. And then I could talk about this all day, but I'll just briefly mention it, of course, because that would be a whole session by itself to talk about the best practices in and around microlearning. But knowing how to leverage that really effectively can actually create behavior change. Again, you can see the full program on Gnowbe if you want to as well. Now, we don't have a bunch of time for this, so maybe we could just kind of comment on it. I was going to get us to do a real quick treasure hunt, but I want to make sure we leave time just for a bit of practical application in terms of scenarios. But maybe you can yell out, shout out, comment if you want to. You can take a photo of something. Do a quick hunt on Gnowbe, or just think of one that you've seen already. What is one feature that encourages behavior change and learner transformation that you've seen on Gnowbe? You can yell that out because I think we've commented on a few already. No one can remember? We've all forgotten? Oh my gosh.
The drip feeds and the timing combines the timing strategy. I think so. The personalized feedback on lessons and follow-up. Yes,
wonderful. Love that. Thanks, Stephanie. Anyone else? I'm going to throw in one that I was talking about earlier, and it was this little guy. Is the copy user answer. So it motivates them, goal setting before and after, and also myself knowing as a creator how they're going. So I will share that to the group in a moment when that uploads. What else have you seen? Again, here it was, one feature that encourages behavior change. So I think I mentioned a couple, like the leaderboards, the sharing to a group wall, and actually being able to see other people's comments. So, here's the example here. There's a lot of different posts, some of which I've missed. Sorry, I love you. Where you can kind of post things, you can like things, you can comment on things like this. There's one, a star rating. I don't know if you come across it. That's a really, really great one. If I go into any single action, have you seen this before, the star rating? So at the top, I'll just see if I've got one actually. Did I embed one in here? This one, for instance. So if I go save
there's
and view.
one in this course actually where you ask how familiar people are.
Oh, sneaky, you found it before me. Exactly. So if I go past this action, yada, 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 and I go through, there we go. Here's an example, right? How much do you know about behavior nudging? I'm going to put this because there's always something new to learn, right? And at the end, you could use that exact same star rating as a great example of establishing pre and post confidence, knowledge, understanding. You can embed that in there. So that's a really, really great tool. The cool thing is on the back end as well, it amalgamates all of that information, actually give you some sense of visualization. So quite often, like SurveyMonkey and all these kinds of other survey sorts of things that we use to see how effective our content is, you actually have to pull that data and do the analysis yourself. That's actually on Gnowbe on the back end already. So I do just want to make mention of that. One more example before we move on. I think we've thrown a few out there already, haven't we? So let's move on to the next, because I do really love this. Oh, sneaky little feature. There's one I didn't mention. So this is the in-app message. So this is a really, really great. I love doing this as obviously it's highlighting the copy and user answer feature here. Do you know where this is? Do I need to show everybody where to find that kind of it's like I call it like the bridge between two actions. It's a great one to throw in. Let's say you've had a text action, they're about to watch a video. And quite often you're jolted because you're like, oh, there's a video right here and it's 20 minutes long and here we go. Being able to put something like this in between to say, Nicola, you're about to watch a 2-minute clip, look for the blah, 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 is a really, really powerful tool. So if you go into edit mode, I'll just really quickly show you where it is. It is this little present box up the top here in every single action. So exactly where the star ratings was is also the option to send, obviously, like an automated email message, which is another example of a behavior change tool, is that in-app message. So if I click it, you can see that's the exact same modality that we talked about before. So definitely a powerful tool in getting people not disrupting the learner flow and keeping them moving through the program content. Okay, here's my favorite part. And it requires a little bit of thinking just for the last couple of minutes, but it's good fun, I promise. Practical application. Why is this important? This is the example of putting the learning on its feet. You don't just want to listen to Nicola as a talking head. You want to collaborate with each other. That's really important. But also you want to be able to put this stuff into practice using a real life scenario that's actually going to drive that learning home. So what I'd love you to do is to pick one of the scenarios below and think what behavior change tools or strategies you would use to make sure that learner transformation takes place. I've literally pulled these from client conversations that I've had, really common ones that come up. So let me just show you how this works. You're going to pick a scenario. Let's just say I say scenario 1, and down the bottom, I've actually kind of put some text as the learner, but sorry, as the creator, I've gone in and kind of made it really, really easy for you just to fill in the blanks. Okay, so I'm just showing you from the creator perspective how you can do that. But from the learner perspective, I'm going to go in and I might just say, I'm going to pick scenario 1. In this scenario, which is this, I'm noticing that new employees coming into our organization are overwhelmed with the amount of content that we require them to know. This causes them to disengage and we're struggling to get them to complete program content. Really, really typical one that I hear a lot. So let's brainstorm that out for a second. Instead of me writing an answer, what would you guys do to make sure that learner transformation is taking place? What is the learner? What is the learner transformation that you would like to take place here? I would imagine the first thing is I want to see better engagement, right? And engagement can look like different things to different people. So that's important too, but maybe it's just simply, it might be program completion. I want to actually make sure that they don't get overwhelmed by session 3 and they're like, I'm done. I can't do 20 more of these things. So it might look like program completion is the kind of the end goal. A better engagement might look like I want to actually see them interact on the social group boards and be collaborative. And then the question that is being asked here is the behavior change tools, or strategies I would use to make sure that learner transformation takes place are, and I'm going to leave that up to you guys for a second. What would you say? What would you use to make sure that people are not overwhelmed by the amount of information, make sure they're engaged, and make sure they complete?
I would make sure that it's very incremental and that they know where they are on which increment and how many more are there so that they can budget their attention.
Love that. So that's more about the content itself. So we're not leveraging any like Gnowbe features or tools at this point, but you're talking about microlearning instructional design, best practices, really. I would say transparency about the journey. You know, things like I mentioned there, like the video, it's 2 minutes long. I want you to look for this. Here is where we are in the learner journey. We've got these series of things to go and we're in session 3 and this is the end goal. Things like that, so helpful. Incremental means I'm actually building on concepts really slowly. I'm not just, here's all the stuff dumped. Hope you catch it. Bye. Really great. Thank you, Stephanie. Anybody else?
So if it's repeated, I apologize. I don't use the locked sessions like you do, but I really like that idea. And I'm thinking if there's a group that's not engaged, by locking it and then having a daily push notification, like you said, it's coming out that I could engage them to follow through. And it would also help with that transparency and incrementalism and get them motivated, hopefully.
So good. I love that. And obviously the option to say because it takes it that step further. So you're thinking about the why behind each of the features or tools that it would use. Is there anyone else who would like to take one of these scenarios and just kind of talk us through? Yeah, Adam, do you want to elaborate on what you've just popped in the chat? That's really good. You just said here, our hybrid in-person learnings include a lot of tangible physical components. We follow up with a check-in on learning by asking, to identify parts of the components. Would you be able to elaborate for us? It's really good.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, everyone, of course, uses the platform differently. For us, we're an appliance manufacturer, so we have a lot of physical components that we have to teach concepts and functionality. We leverage Gnowbe by outlining what the components are. We follow up with physical components in front of the students, and if we're unsure if they know that they're learning, then we would simply turn to the physical components as explain what this is. So of course that doesn't apply to every scenario with every company, but for us it works really well.
Really good. And then so the assessment pro tool might come in really handy for you if there's like set answers. You could actually kind of use the, you know, that typical kind of grading. You've got to get 9 out of 10 in order to pass, or the pro being able to give more qualitative answers where you can actually give them feedback. Hey, you got this part right, but this part you need to tweak. Might be really valuable for you. But yeah, super, super good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else? It's a great thing. I would definitely encourage you to go through and just pick one of these scenarios and just nut it through, not for the benefit of completing the action, but really for our own learning, because they are really common scenarios. And if we think about the why behind the tools that we use, you know, the why is, I want to see this behavior change, whatever that is. I want to see transformation, whatever that is. Me being able to reverse engineer just means that the tools are meaningfully used and I get that result that I'm actually aiming to get at the end. So just because of time, I will actually just really quickly just mention, I know a couple of us are familiar with this already, but we're thinking about the next cohort that's coming around in, I think it's June 27th. We have a Microlearning Instructional Design accreditation program that a couple of us might be familiar with. Just because you've jumped on this call, and we're actually happy to give you a discount of this much. So if you're really curious about this, feel free to email me directly, and maybe Megan, you can throw my email on the chat. But Microlearning Instructional Design, it's a beautiful way just being able to, we haven't been able to go after that in this particular class, but it gives you some really great strategies, tools. There's some AI components in there, so we can actually leverage that effectively to reach this end goal of learner transformation and behavior change. So I did just want to mention that that was there. There will be a follow-up session with best practices. Hey, what did you actually learn? What did you take away? What you inspired by? What's your next step? Would definitely love to hear from you. So I'm going to unlock that session for you right now so that you can go ahead and complete that. And please feel free to reach out if you want to learn more about Gnowbe. But I'd be curious, just if we're still here for one more minute, just to stop sharing my screen and learn what's the takeaway from today. What was valuable for you? I think it sounds like the daily messaging was one of the things that stood out for a few people, just some of the features that you didn't know that Gnowbe had. I think for some of us, it was the goal of learner transformation. What is it we're hoping to achieve when we actually craft our content? Hopefully that you've taken away something that's really valuable for you. That's great feedback. Thanks, Stephanie. So there's lots of easy tools to use in Gnowbe to achieve the goal of microlearning. Totally. Really great to have you with us. We hope to see you at the next masterclass. And if you want to know more about our microlearning or about our platform, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us today. See you later.